Bienvenidas.
Bienvenidas, comadres and friends, to our May 2021 teleconference. This is Tess Tobin, Las Comadres para las Americas, New York City Book Club co-coordinator and membership coordinator for our National Book Club. We wish you and your familias health, safety, and love. We continue to pray for all affected by the pandemic. We encourage you to put laughter into your life. Prayer and laughter help us relieve stress. Our May 2021 teleconference features two wonderful novels by Gabriella Garcia and Gabriella Burnham. First, a bit of history about our book club. Our first book club gathering was in July 2004 in New York at Comadre Maria Ferrer's apartment. After a hiatus, it was restarted in March 2007. Comadre Johanna Castillo, at that time national organizer of the book club and former Comadres board member, said, "We are launching the book club to promote the work of Latino authors to every book lover, to bring our community to bookstores, and to support our writers. Now more than ever, we need to support our Latino authors." We encourage you to join our local book club in your city or time zone. We have 12 clubs in 12 cities that are meeting virtually. There is sure to be one that can fit your schedule. If your city doesn't have one, why not help us start one? For more information about our book club, visit our website at latinolit.com. We started these teleconferences, Reading with Las Comadres, in October 2007. We are in our 14th year of sharing works by Latino authors with all of you. We created the Reading with Las Comadres teleconferences and book club in an effort to entice everyone to read more Latino authors, to learn about Latino roots and different perspectives on Latino cultures and heritage. Our book club and teleconferences are open to all, not just Latinos. We are creating a space for everyone to explore the Latino writer's mind and soul as portrayed through the written word. So please invite others to join us. We are very grateful to the publishers Flatiron Books and One World for their support of this teleconference with free books. For more information about the authors and publishers, visit our website at latinolit.com. Our first author, Gabriela Garcia, will be interviewed by Julia Abrantes. Let's learn a little bit about Gabriela Garcia. Gabriela Garcia is the author of the novel Of Women in Salt from Flatiron US publisher and Picador, the United Kingdom, and in 7 other languages. Her fiction and poems have appeared in Best American Poetry, In-House, Iowa Review, Michigan Quarterly Review, the Cincinnati Review, Black Warrior Review, and elsewhere. She received a Rona Jaffrey Foundation Writers Award, a Steinbeck Fellowship, and residencies and fellowships from Breadloaf, Saraband Books, Lighthouse Works, the Keller Estate, and the Community of Writers at Squaw Valley. She has an MFA in fiction from Purdue University, where she also taught creative writing. The daughter of immigrants from Cuba and Mexico, Gabriela was raised in Miami, and currently lives in the Bay Area. In her past life, she worked in music, magazines, technology, and feminist and immigrant rights organizing. Our interviewer, Julia Abrantes, is the submissions coordinator for Las Comadres and Friends Book Club and a stalwart of Las Comadres for over 11 years. Comadre Julia, take it away.
Gracias, Tess, for that introduction. And Gabriela, welcome this evening to our teleconference.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much. So for those who may be listening in and may not have read the story, can you give us a little synopsis of it?
Sure. So, Of Women in Salt is a kind of fractured narrative in the voices of all women, and there's many different women from two different families whose lives kind of come together in an unexpected way. One family is Cuban and Cuban American, and some of the narrative takes place in Cuba, some of it takes place in Miami across many decades, and then the other family is Salvadoran, and it's a mother and daughter who are living in Miami, and some of it also takes place in a detention center in Texas, and some of it takes place in Mexico. And at the heart, it's really about sort of the ways that these women navigate a really patriarchal society, the ways that they survive, the mother and daughter relationships. And, it touches on issues of race, of class, and about how women sort of, pick up the pieces and in some ways support each other. Sometimes not so much, but it's really, I think, at the heart about the mother-daughter relationship.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So your parents are Cuban and Mexican immigrants. How did their experiences and background influence this book?
Yeah, I mean, the book is not autobiographical, but there's, of course, pieces of me in everything that I write. And, I think I grew up in Miami, which is, I think, maybe one of the only cities that is majority Latinx. And my parents, so I grew up in this world where I should have fit in really easily. But my parents, being Cuban and Mexican, had such different experiences in the country in terms of immigration, in terms of how they were sort of accepted in Miami, and everything really had to do with sort of race and class and reasons for migration. And so I grew up really aware that Latinx identity is not monolithic, that these experiences can be so different. And so I think some of that is definitely in the writing. Like, I wanted all of these characters to sort of reflect a very different experiences, and then their lives sort of clash in some ways. Like, part of it is, Jeanette, the Cuban American character, is living next door to Gloria, who is Salvadoran, and they're having such really different experiences in Miami, even though they're like living right next to each other. And so, I think my own background made me very aware of the multidimensionality of these stories.
Yeah, it really comes across, and thank you for sharing that. The book presents MultiGeneration, so we have 5, and as you mentioned in your little preface there, it's 2 families that wind up, the stories intertwine later on in life, and so it begins at points, there's long-held secrets that come out in one generation or the other. The stories begin in Camagüey, Cuba, back in 1866, and come through present-day Miami in 2018. Can you share with us a little bit about the force that each of the generations had between them that sustained them?
Yeah, so again, I think, there's this phrase, "we are force," that kind of weaves throughout the book, that it's written in the margins of a book that gets sort of passed down through generations. And I think I wanted to leave it sort of open to interpretation, like it can mean many different things. It can mean like the sort of, the kind of force that propels all of these women to survive in this world that doesn't want them to survive. I think it's also can be like the conditions that are sort of forced upon people, you know, if they didn't choose for themselves. It can also be like the historical forces. Like a lot of these women are really shaped by all of these histories and stories that they don't know, you know, these secrets that they don't know, that yet have such an impact on their own lives. The trajectory of their lives shapes so much of who they are, you know. So it can refer to those historical forces, and it can refer to the ways that a lot of these lives are sort of forced to like interact with each other. So it can mean many different things, and I sort of, you know, I was thinking about it that way. Like I wanted it to sort of be able to mean many different things, and for readers to be able to interpret it in their own ways too.
Yeah. I that's something that I love about stories, where, especially when you read a book, you know, it's up to you to do some of the interpreting as it goes along. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think also there's often like this idea that as writers, like we know what we're doing purposefully, you know, but sometimes I discover things about my writing that like I may have not even been consciously aware of, but like a reader will sort of come away with something and I'll realize like, oh yeah, that makes total sense, you know?
Absolutely.
So I love that, you know, I love that we can also sort of interact with interpreting a text.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So, you know, the story does take place in Mexico, Cuba, and the U.S. Did you, when you set out, let me rephrase the question. Okay, so I've always been told, you know, write what you know, or write from what you know, right? And if I was to write a book, I should write what I know. So did you, when you sat out to write this book, did you have an idea that it was going to be a story set in Mexico, Cuba, and the U.S.? And did you do that as to, like, pay homage to your family history when writing it?
I think in many ways that phrase, write what you know, comes from sort of the fact that like the most authentic, believable storytelling often comes from that which you're intimately familiar with. And I grew up traveling a lot to Cuba, a lot to Mexico, and most of my family on my Mexican side still lives in Mexico. I also have a lot of family in Cuba. So, you know, I grew up sort of enmeshed in all of these places. In Miami, obviously, I grew up there. So I think I'm naturally maybe drawn to writing about those places because they are most familiar to me. You know, like the Mexico chapter is set in Irapuato, which is, you know, the city where my dad is from and where most of my Mexican side of my family lives. And then Cuba, you know, I was also in Cuba a lot while I was writing the book. So all of those places sort of come into the writing. And, you know, there are other ways that there are sort of pieces of the book that are drawn from my life. Like there's also, you know, a couple of chapters set in a detention center in Texas. And while I was writing those chapters, I was working with some migrant justice organizations, and I was working with women in detention and visiting detention centers in Texas. So, you know, that came into some of my writing. So I think, you know, it's not that these are my family histories, because in many ways the characters that I write are really different, like very, very different from my own family. But I think, you know, places and people that I'm familiar with, absolutely my writing.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. What inspired you to set the beginning of the Cuba stories in the 1860s?
So actually, that came out of a trip that I took to Cuba. and I went to this museum exhibit where there were these letters from Victor Hugo, the author of Les Miserables, to Cuban independence fighters and workers in the 1850s and 60s. And I became really fascinated with that sort of interplay between literature and the political movements of the time. And then also, my family was always really into cigars, so I grew up with all of these Cuban cigars that are named things like Romeo y Julietas and Montecristos, and I never knew the origins of those names, that they actually came from books that cigar workers were read, and that became really popular in the cigar workshops, and so they actually named these cigars after those books. So I became super just so fascinated by that, and wanted to kind of research and look into it more. And so that chapter is sort of inspired by that. And then so much of the novel is about stories, the stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, the stories that other people tell us about us, the stories that we don't even know but that affect our lives. And so starting at a place where those books come into play and those stories are like such a part of the narrative felt like kind of an entry point into the whole novel.
No, that was really cool, really, really cool. We had a couple of our readers comment on the strong women characters in this book. Is there one that you identify with more than the other?
I feel like I was sort of really drawn to all of them in different ways.
Okay.
And what's been really kind of interesting to hear from readers is that people seem to really connect to different women. Like some people are like, oh, I just really wanted more from Maria Isabel, or like I wanted to read more about Dolores, or like people just, every person seems to have like a different woman character that they're more drawn to, which is really interesting. But I think in many ways the book sort of turns back to Jeanette often. And I think maybe part of that is that she was maybe the easiest character for me to sort of enter into her consciousness, because even though we're really different in a lot of ways, like she's, the daughter of immigrants growing up in Miami. And so there are some ways that I could sort of connect to that character more easily, maybe, or access that character more easily. And so maybe that's why I sort of turn to her more often.
Okay. Very cool. Very, very cool. One of our readers asked about the title of the book, Of Women and Salt. They wondered if, the salt, how that came to be. How did you come up with that title?
Yeah, so in addition to fiction, I also write poetry. And I think I often think of my titles kind of the same way that I think about my titles in poetry, which is like, it's not necessarily like a literal title that you can, that refers to like a part of the book that refers to women or salt. But I sort of went through the book and was looking at words that came up often. Okay. I knew I wanted women in the title because it's a book that's written all in the voices of women. And then, salt came up at various points, and I liked the feeling of those words. I liked that it could mean many different things. I liked that the salt comes up in many different contexts. And so it was more about like evoking a feeling for me than it was about like a literal sort of interpretation.
Okay, that's pretty good. That's pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, we had discussions about it, and they were like, well, when you think of salt, it brings flavor to everything, and you use it to enhance almost, everything that you eat, and stuff like that. So, we were just talking back and forth about it. So that was
Yeah.
something that, was pretty interesting.
Yeah, and I love that. I love when something can just again, sort of take on different meanings or maybe mean all of those things,
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And another one of our readers wanted to ask, you have the family tree in the beginning of the book. They wanted to know who X is.
Yeah, so I wanted the feel of the book to sort of feel like the way memory or historical accounts feel, which is there are you often just have pieces of your history or
right.
glimpses of it and not a full picture, or there are these spaces of unknowing where you don't know. And so the book isn't like a traditional saga in which every single generation and it goes into detail with the character. In this case, the X is just a space of unknowing,
Okay.
There isn't, sort of skips a generation. And I sort of, wanted that to be like that. I wanted it to sort of, again, feel like how fuzzy memory and history can feel.
I think we all have those spaces in our family history. I mean, Ancestry.com does a lot, but, there's always that unknown part of our history. But I think that makes us all who we are. So, that little bit of unknown.
Yeah, and you're sort of filling it in with your own ideas,
exactly.
or interpreting it in your own ways. And that's sort of how I thought of this novel. There's a lot of just you as a reader sort of filling in and interpreting things, which can be interpreted in many different ways.
Of course. And then there's so many present day and just topical subjects that are covered in the book. What would you like the readers to take away, when they're done reading the book?
I think ultimately, like I said, I'm sort of open to people taking away different things or just taking away what makes sense for them in their lives, and there's, like you said, there are many different things that come up. There are all these interactions that can tie into sort of real life issues of detention, of race, of class, of so many different things. But ultimately, I really wanted to write a book that was focused on these individual characters, navigating this world and navigating these issues. And so I hope that's what readers connect to, just really connect to these women as individual people, and sort of understanding the complexity of every different woman, the multitudes of worlds that exist in all women.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, and I think we all do that, where we may find parts of us in different stories. And I'll admit, some of it was difficult for me to read. But, you go through it and you read it and you come out stronger, or you learn that, what other people have gone through this as well, and they survived. So, and reading all the stories here, even though it was jumping back and forth and everything like that, when it all came together, it was just a beautiful book, and we thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, that piece about survival, I think about it as, yeah, these women, a lot of them survive, but I also sort of want to write against the idea that women have to be strong, and that this, these expectations exist of survival rather than sort of asking why we expect that of women, like what the conditions are that sort of force us to think of survival. And like some of the women, I mean, I also wanted to sort of show that there's a cost often to survival. Like some of these women make it, some of them don't, you know. And so I think that is sort of important to me too, again, just showing the multi-dimensionality of the way that like generational trauma can work.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes it's not even realized until, you know, much later on, and they realize that the damage has been done and it's there. And what are you working on next?
Yeah, so I usually have like multiple stuff going on at the same time. You know, I haven't started on a sort of longer novel project, which I do want to eventually start on, but I've been really focused on shorter things right now. Like, you know, I've been working on some short stories, and I also, like I said, write poetry. I think it's just been really hard to focus, like during the pandemic and during everything that's been going on. And so I've turned to a lot of smaller projects that I feel more doable for me right now.
That's understandable. And we definitely look forward to seeing your next work when that comes out. You know, please keep us in mind and let us know, whether it be poetry, which we do feature poetry a couple of times a year, and even if it's a collection of short stories. We'd love to share that with our readers as well.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
It means a lot.
Absolutely. We thank you so much for taking the time with us this evening. I've actually gone through all of my questions here. And so we thank you again, Gabriella, for joining us and for sharing of Women in Salt with our readers tonight.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, I'm so honored that you've all been reading it and taking away different things from it. And so just, you know, thank you so much for reading it and engaging with it.
Thank you again. Thank you again. Comadre Tess, if you're there.
Yeah?
Okay. Well, it looks like the other Gabriella Burnham has not been able to join us this evening. So why don't we read her bio, and then we'll just close out the teleconference this evening.
Okay. Okay, very good, Julia. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that Gabriella isn't here, but Gabriella Burnham is a dual citizen of the United States and Brazil, now a New York resident. She lived in São Paulo as a child, and most of her family still lives there today. She holds an MFA in creative writing from the Writers Foundry at St. Joseph's College and has been awarded fellowships to MacDowell Colony and Yaddo. She has worked as a reporter, a creative writing teacher, and in immigration law. Her novel, It Is Wood, It Is Stone, is her first novel. Okay, well, we'll go to the closing. Thank you, Comadre Gabriella. We are so grateful for your insightful interview and for spending time with us this evening. We enjoy the sharing of perspectives and insights from your work and your life. We treasured the opportunity to learn about you, and we feel more connected to you. We thank Flatiron Books and One World for their support of this teleconference and for their generous gifts of books for winners of early registration. We thank our audience for taking the time to join us for this teleconference, and to thank you for those who submitted questions. And we'd like to thank Comadre Maria Ferrer for the media coordination and the Twitter chat, and to Comadre Dora Abreu for the web work she does for us. Without this volunteer leadership team, this book club and all the associated work would not happen. Mil gracias. Please remember to support our authors by writing a review of their books on sites like Amazon, Goodreads, Barnes & Nobles, etc. Those reviews carry weight with the publishers as well as other readers. Buy books to support our authors, and if your library does not have a book and you want to read it, ask them to order it. And please attend your local book club meetings and bring a friend or two. Remember, it's open to everyone, men and women, and not just Latinos. For June, we will be featuring works by two of our compadres. Remember My Face, a Willie Cuesta mystery by John Lantigua, and Every Day We Get More Illegal by Juan Felipe Herrera. Our teleconference for June will be held on Monday, June 28, 2021. Once again, we are keeping you all in our thoughts and prayers through these times. Thank you for your continued support of our book club and Latino literature. Mil gracias to all. Stay safe and follow the guidelines in your local area and for wearing your masks. Buenas noches.
Buenas noches.